I heard a distant thud and felt reverberations through the floor. Some explosive ordnance had gone off in the battle below. I was beginning to catch a glimpse of what some of the troops were combating on the streets. Grotesque, cranky, three-headed, far-barking chimera with barbed and evidently poisonous quills, judging from casualties dropped by a single lancing quill. It grew from the ground as fast-growth modules and had been dropped into the atmosphere from the FTL-2 unit and floated to ground, extracting mass and energy to fill themselves. Farbarkan were not chimera unknown to galactic extremal humans. They had some good as well as evil uses. I was mildly surprised that the Aristarch sent such creatures to CLC, since they were one of the first products of the wicked school of genome redesign of the infamous Dr. Ian Gland. Even so, our troops were just holding their own for the time being, suffering comparatively few casualties. Carla began examining long and intermediate range field sensors in the control room, while Solomon said something about the logical points of dispersion of Aristarch arrivals. I asked him, what about the quantification specs criterion for an FTL-2 unit? As the Aristarchs have seized, what can it put here? That Aristarch FTL-2 unit can send a maximum load of 9 tons and a cyclic send rate of 4 per hour in order to stop any sort of relativistic effects from snap blasting this sender facility. That's why I was not too surprised at the choice of Black Slime for the first attack, yet was mildly surprised at the choice of Farbarkan Chimera. Better make that green. Green Slime for the first attack. It was mildly surprised at the choice of Farbarkan Chimera for the second, since that isn't at all an optimal use of weight restrictions. In regard to attack potential, John. That Aristarch FTL-2 unit can send a maximum load of 9 tons. I've learned quite a bit about history and technology from Neuromem since my rebirth and liberation, Solomon. That has led me to wonder about the potential for a second wave follow-up of neuron nanocoercives or CPU viruses that would burrow into animal species of CLC and take over thought, making them convertible to warrior tools. The Aristarchs seem to economize on war assets with clever tech conversions of existing animal and human resources into weapons of war with a bias against humans. Yes, that is a definite danger. 9-ton shipments of CPU viral ticks and nanocontrollers for animal minds could be in the cards. I'll begin an antigen AI countermeasure action group and scouts for it. Carla and I descended to the street level to get a closer look at the Farbarkan and the soldiers' defense efforts. Farbarkan band roved along building walls in the street looking for opportunities to flank troop positions and tear them up into bite-sized chunks. The troops alternatively had semi-AI interlocking field fire coordination with their rifles that showed green sector lines. I better change that to blue since I use green above. Sector lines on weapon video displays were interlocking sector and rate of fire coverage responded to fire control to produce optimum casualties with minimal fire. The animals were being decimated. We returned to the control room deck to follow Solomon's work preparing for what probably lay ahead. We should prepare the hanging gardens of Satyricon Gambit now. What is that, Solomon? I asked. He asked, do you know how to cut filet mignon, John? Well, sure, I guess one would logically slice chunks of meat off a lengthy piece of meat running along. I guess one would logically slice chunks of meat off a lengthy piece. Running along the backbone of a cow. Elliman said, "That's close enough. Wait a couple of minutes and I will describe the plan. I need to set these anti-Farbark and defense countermeasure traps with remotes first." "So I thought I would ask you about the relationship of energy to mass, Carla. Einstein said that energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, and since nothing in relativistic space-time can travel faster than light, the idea of light quanta traveling in opposite directions at an effective speed of twice the speed of light is nominal. That is, Einstein couldn't have selected E equal mc cubed or something like that when he intended to express the opinion that energy is simply a relationship of motion amidst mass with force." "Those are good ideas, John Dwight. Energy is an agitated state of mass accomplished with several means. It can be worthwhile to consider the ones of the first instance of the universe when considering energy." "Really, Carla? Why is that?" Some people thinking about Einstein's famous equation, E equal mc squared, believe he was associating energy with massless photons, and that, of course, wasn't the definition of energy. It may be an idealized concept of energy in its top-level form, yet it is not a definition of energy as photons in themselves. Einstein defined energy as a phase of mass within space-time, and that is how we can get to the topic of the theoretical conditions for the start of a given universe accepted as basic parameters thousands of years ago in the pioneering 21st century physics epoch. We moved closer to the observation window to see the ongoing battle against the street Farbarkan stories below. Einstein's formula isn't symmetric, is it, Carla? That is, it isn't quite reversible. If one were to convert a specific volume of mass into energy and leave it as photons of a given quantity, it wouldn't be possible to reconvert that quantity of energy back into mass. Yes, I like that observation, John. Light as massless photons hasn't gravity or gravitons about it, and so we naturally may wonder where it is that gravitons go and mass is converted into energy. Do gravitons disperse themselves about space-time in any particular way that has a relationship to the pattern distribution of mass converted into energy in a given way? I haven't a clue, Carla. What do you think? I think that gravity is an emergent characteristic of mass, sinking in space-time as well. In space is time. Purest energy is massless particles becoming entangled into molecular or subatomic balanced static forms, even if orbiting one another at the speed of light, collectively in their atomic steady state, aren't moving anywhere at all with anything like relativistic speed and sink in space in comparison to free-ranging massless particle waves. Each particle of mass in the universe in the steady state of being sinks, drawing other atoms together in relation to their ongoing slow distribution around space. I believe that the gravity of warping space may be an effect of time, an emergent effect locally that occurs at the speed of light and that does not follow, with mass converted into nearly massless forms such as photons. That doesn't bring one to wonder about the singularity at the start of the universe and the inflaton thereafter, doesn't it, Carla? Indeed it does, John. Consider the unlikely hypothetical state of a singularity containing all of the mass of this universe brought together with gravity and locked into a steady and yet very small area before expansion. Theoretically, one wonders why it did not become infinitely small and why it would ever quit shrinking in size during gravitational collapse. Gravity would be so intense with space, so infinitely warped, that nothing, not even virtual particles, could escape. The physicist Stephen Hawking thought that virtual particles could escape the nearly infinite strength and curvature of singularities, presumably including the ultimate singularity containing all of the mass of the universe, with quantum uncertainty relocating some particle-antiparticle quanta beyond the event horizon. The exfiltration of mass outside the event horizon might create an imbalance in the mass clumped in the ultimate singularity, such that particle and antiparticle pairs would become unbalanced and in some way cause an explosion that would burst the singularity and black hole for a fraction of a second. Just enough time for the mass to expand in liberation, recombine as particle-antiparticle pairs of mass, annihilate one another nearly completely with just a tiny percent of mass remaining unbound. And then that mass would be cast on the wave of unbound space-time for a fraction of a second, faster than light, naturally creating a grapefruit-sized universe with an inertia continuing to fling that mass outward as it slowed down from the effects of the inflaton. I like it, Carl. That adds to my understanding of mass, energy, gravity, and space-time. Of course, I still wonder about space and time, all that hypothetical beginning, and even now, when the first particles escape beyond the event horizon, is gravity associated with virtual particles, and is there virtual gravity? What is space that it could be curved? What about the curvature of space in the initial singularity, as impacted four-dimensional space was reduced to 0 dimensions? What happened to gravity during the first imbalance in the steady state? Was space curved in extra-dimensional configurations or driven in upon itself as the out-of-balance clump exploded with rebounding, imploding recombination of particle and antiparticle pairs into union, liberating the greatest gravitational wave of history, surviving mass in the inflaton? Those are good questions, John Dwight. You may even wonder if the sum total of gravity in the entire universe is a constant, and the way that it is distributed is what is of interest. Yet I see that Solomon has finished making the Farbarkan countermeasure settings. Calvin, Luther, Caesar had forests as well as ice, ocean, and mountains. The city was located at an environmental conjunction of most, in addition to a verdant plain in 3 directions, trailing off toward more mountains. The forest was of immediate concern, with its complications of structure and form offering cover and concealment to invasive species now, as it had for hundreds of thousands of years, as well as offering refuge from predators. It was from the multicolored leaves and towering steeples of trees covering rolling hills that a variety of flying and running animals emerged to attack the city. Bat creatures and birds splattered themselves against windows and exterior building walls in senseless death. The streets ran red with blood from hordes of creatures that swelled in attack from all directions in a variety of forms. Many of the animals were recognizable descendants of Earth evolutions, and others were not. Evidently, the nanoviruses of coronation had arrived and entered the brains of the planetary animals of CLC, converting the opposition force of Aristarchus. The streets ran red with blood from hordes of creatures that swelled in attack from all directions in a variety of forms. Many of the animals were recognizable descendants of Earth evolutions, and others were not. Evidently, the nanoviruses of coronation had arrived and entered the brains of the planetary animals of CLC, converting them into programmable biological computer cyborg vectors for the opposition force of Aristarchus. Solomon even instructed us to move toward the transportation tunnel entrance. We must begin a staged withdrawal from the attacking animal vectors that will overwhelm our defenses from sheer weight of numbers. Plainly, the animals are programmable and have received upgrades to the use of their intellect, such as enables better attacking methods. You too could helpfully draw the leading edge of attackers after you as you make a journey toward the underground control. A few of our civilian and military residents remain underground or even on the planet. We have had them evacuated to our Spara dwarf star world safely within their double hulls surrounding each star. We will draw the tunnel network as full of the enemy as we can before sapping primary air security locks to crush them, collapsing the entire grid down on them. What made you decide on such a radical course, Solomon? It was always our plan in case Coronation was able to attack us here or on our neighboring world. We assumed they would present a cocktail of nanotech and biological war. As an efficient application of weight limits on faster-than-light technologies, they might avail themselves of. Fundamentally, such amalgam attacks aren't qualitatively defensible without a saturation chamber of planetary control that Calvin Luther Caesar hasn't got. Even so, as you proceed toward the center before taking an FTL hop to our seventh dwarf's world located several light years further from the edge of the galaxy, would you please turn out the light in each chamber that starts the demolition charges for me? I replied with some concern. Sure will, Solomon. What about you? I have a few details to attend to before leaving. Get on your way now, Even urged. We stepped across the room to the drop shaft in a chute of foam security blanket with overriding instructions spoken to the tube controlling logic. Our withdrawal was slower than the usual speed through the network, and a variety of biological mass vectors insinuated themselves into the system through a plethora of corrupting penetrations. The network behind is filled with loathsome beasts arranged with a perverse logic of imperial aristarchs of Coronation, in addition to biocellular morphology. The sole purpose of the biomass was to destroy sentient human life, and the remaining was mostly just us and some few remaining military forces providing planet-wide cover for the patrol to the centers, underground, and evacuation sites. We set the light switches off behind us. There was a programmed delay that would allow the network to fill with bad animals before collapsing from each end inward after we made the last exit. Solomon even completed his task of setting cobalt bomb atmospheric detonations that would end the atmosphere of Calvin Luther Caesar and bring the abyssal void of deep space down to the surface. He then set out through a fast surface atmospheric shot in a rocket sled pole to reach a closer entrance to the FDL-5 facility below an emergency surface hatch. When he dropped to the surface, got out of the rocket sled poles, and entered the emergency chute to the FDL-5 facility 2 miles underground, closing the hatch behind him, the atmosphere of the planet was set aflame. Plasma white blue burning the away within seconds. Cold chaos of deep space dropped super shearing wind and dust clouds, roiling death upon everything living and respiring. The temperature began a quick drop to within a few degrees of absolute zero, and the light of the moon itself extinguished itself forever in a final flare of bright white explosive light. Carla and I switched off several tunnel lights, activating corresponding demolition timers, making a stop at each sailing security lock every 100 miles. Even deep underground, we felt a tremendous seismic shockwave emanating from the direction of the surface. Our lead in front of the trailing menagerie of deranged beasts was ephemeral at best, with Carla and I finding ourselves on numerous occasions combating and killing with slice and fry toaster guns the vile creatures that reached and entered our transit vehicle. John, Carla looked at me and said, John, that the galactic halo has several globular clusters in retrograde orbit passing through the dark matter beyond the edge. We may get a view of our galaxy from the red dwarf world, seldom viewed by humans before. I love the prospect, Carla. Yet as the last humans through this network, we had better keep focused on our immediate task, or we may overlook our own survival. John, we have just made a stop at the last security lock. My guess is that the demolition sequence will go terminal in the time it takes us to reach this point. Carla's last words were accompanied with a tremendous pressure wave back of us in the tunnel with the light and trailing sound of a large charged explosive that was a phenomenon repeated through the length and breadth of the planet's transit network as other last humans on the planet transport network duplicated our task. The planet's animal majority was buried alive in the system's network collapse under millions of tons of riprap rock. Our shuttle began to slow as it arrived at the remaining FTL-3 unit in our sector, where a cyborg stood on the platform to greet us and usher us into the unit set for Red Dwarf World 7 and to demolish itself after the last humans left. Emergency hatch snapping shut above him, Solomon even slid down the dark shaft with calluses on his hands roughly sanded off as he used his hands to slow falling a dozen stories to the base of the ladder. He stood on a small platform with a sugar chute step-aboard rectangular elevator with the looping suspended hand grip over his head. Moving to stand on and engage the mechanism, the semi-darkness of his low photon optics revealed the chute walls passing by with increasing speed. Plexifab transparent containment walls rose from floor to ceiling of the unit to encase him in the safety required for continuing acceleration downward to the FTL-5 containment chamber. Then of a sudden the ride ended, and with a jolt, slowed only stiffly, and he was cast out when the Plexifab transparency opened onto the FTL-5 floor. Solomon set the unit to relocate to its embedded home on Red Dwarf Double Dyson World 7 and set the outer 3 miles Calvin Luther Caesar to seismically agitate itself until reaching a molten phase that would then transition to a new element, encasing the world in dark, shiny gray velspicium. The FTL-5 unit relocated itself transcendently along with Solomon even standing within. RDF DD7. Carla and I entered the FTL-3 unit and phase shifted to Red Dwarf Double Dyson Sphere 7, watching fading visions of magenta Yin-Slogoth tentacles growing hellishly from jellied wheeled motifs reaching for the unit with dozens of hateful eyes in their tips. We faded into a vast light cone column chamber that was the double-sphered interior space of RDF-DD7. My initial impression of the chamber was of a misty, motionless, shimmering chamber, shimmering of mirages through a cloud of unknowing. For we came to rest not upon a normal floor and a normal world such as they are, but on a null space hosting powerful tension universe columns that stretched in every direction as far as the eye could see. When we were completely solid in several seconds, the chamber remained translucent, ripe with quantum ripples of uncertainty regarding space-time. I looked at Carla, and she looked at me, and appeared to be fine. Solomon even materialized from the mist to express, apparently you survived the exfiltration. I'm glad to see that you made it here okay. Immediately, Carla asked Solomon, this is the full-size version of the FTL-5 unit? Actually, Carla, this is the same FTL-5 unit that was on Calvin Luther Caesar. It relocated itself here to become embedded within the double Dyson spheres around our red dwarf star. It is a functioning prototype at this location and is omnipresent around the global parameters. I want to ask you if you encountered any of the Aristotelian nihilists before your last exit. Coronation may have sent a few of those loyalists to tyranny to gather up intelligence about our world. I don't believe we saw any, Solomon. What do they look like? I wondered aloud to reply. They take many forms, yet prefer a magenta look, often with tentacles in some way or another. Well then, Solomon, I can say that we did just escape a clutch of magenta tentacles in the FTL-3 station as we left. Solomon explained something of the nature of the world and the unit to us. RDF-DD7 is the seventh of 1,400 double Dyson sphere constructions built around red dwarf stars of various sizes that humans have constructed beyond the edge of the galactic halo. Emitting zero light externally, they are fairly hard to find in the vastness of space. We feel that for a time, they may provide security sufficient to keep a half of a trillion humans alive. The energy source of each is self-sustaining far beyond the expected life of the universe, and each world has sublight speed harvest units that can collect dark matter to return to build up soil for living and growing plants in each world. Interstellar dust in some regions of the halo is substantial and can be collected without significantly altering the balance of gravitational solid-state cosmic matter of the galaxy. Columns of light cones you see are historically factual universes that are cataloged and represented proportionally before you. The null space ceilings above and below represent the non-contingent, original, and non-relativistic fields of omnipresent, eternal God. The universes are predetermined. physically, even though there are elements of quantum uncertainty within each. Universes are of finite space-time composition that are embedded within non-contingent eternity. That is always the same moment. The predetermined nature of mass and energy enable us to elucidate the sets of constructions that would be the design of each theoretical and materialized universe that ever was or that ever will be. Our theologians of physics have discovered that Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem that provided unique formula for each mathematical axiom of specific mathematical numbers enabled them, as I understand it, to assign blockchain unique tracking numbers for each quantum component of every universe that could ever be, as well as to disambiguate the location of space and time travelers making journeys through any given universe or universes. If you were to walk around this double Dyson sphere encapsulated FTL5 unit to view the universe, you would discover that not only is the sphere finite yet unbound, it is also infinite and unbounded in its presentation of content. As the light comes, you encounter would become different and new to you as you ventured into new regions of atemporal relations that include non-spatial representative universe content too. As if it were without space whatsoever, except as expanded in the form of a light cone, like a thin snake engorging with a full belly, given to eventually star or burst as the case may be. May I ask you what you would like to do now, or where you would like to go? Since for the time being, I think we have the war situation with the Aerostar under control, since our tactical withdrawal appears to have delivered the humans of this region safety. Yes, Solomon, I believe we should return to Orbitron and let them know what we've found, if that's all right with you and Carla. She replied, it is fine with me, John. And Solomon agreed. Excellent. God be with you. And let us know of your status with regard to the Aerostar as soon as it is convenient for you. And with that, we faded away from his